The Future of Coaching is Team Coaching podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide.
We're your hosts, Georgina Woudstra and
Allard de Jong, that's me.
We're coaches, writers, and the founders of the Team Coaching Studio.
In this series, we explore the exciting, dynamic, and fast-growing discipline of team coaching.
Our ambition is to contribute to the quality and impact of team coaching worldwide and to share insights and experience that will inspire you to keep developing as a team coach.
Hello and welcome, everyone. This is episode 2 of our series of podcasts for the Association for Coaching. My name is Allard and I'm here with
Georgina Woudstra.
Excellent. What are we talking about today, Georgina?
We're going to talk about what is real team coaching. I know that may sound a bit provocative, what's real and what's not real. So what we're talking about is real team coaching from our own perspective. And a lot of people ask questions about what's the difference between coaching and other types of interventions and what does good team coaching look like. So we're going to try to talk about that and illustrate that today.
Yeah, and I think as good a place as any to start, because when we talk about team coaching, and God knows we talk about team, this is all we do. That's all we talk about the whole day. But, of course, when you talk about team coaching, you're talking about coaching first and foremost. And so maybe it's worthwhile just to go back to the definition of what coaching and what coaching is or what team coaching how we might define team coaching.
Yes, absolutely. And when you say that, that takes me back to when I first trained as a coach. And what inspired me most about coaching was this idea that the solutions are within the client and that we follow the client's agenda. And that sounds incredibly simple, but I remember when I was training 30 years ago, it was incredibly hard to do, to really stop trying to solution and stop trying to be the clever one and to access the wisdom and potential for within the client. So that's one of the things in my definition is it's a creative process that accesses the client's potential. How about you? How do you see what is coaching to you?
I think if I answer that in a way in a similar way to what you just said, to me one of the key aspects that stands out from the beginning is this notion of a partnership, a true partnership. And even when I look at today's ICF definition of team coaching, they use some of those words that we've just mentioned. So the ICF will define team coaching as, and I'm reading from their website, as partnering in a co-creative and reflective process with a team and its dynamics and relationships in a way that inspires them to maximize their abilities and potential in order to reach their common purpose and shared goals. And so when I read that, right through that, you can see their definition of coaching.
Yeah, and that definition of coaching is so core to how we show up in the room and how we work with clients. And when we're training team coaches, very often we'll ask them to think back to say, how do you approach that in one-to-one coaching? How do you think about that or relate to that question in one-to-one coaching? So I think that's really fundamental. I mean, one of the things that is significant about coaching that we talked about in the last episode is this idea of awareness and responsibility. So part of the function of coaching is to create awareness in the client, and in team coaching, the client is the team, and to invite ownership of decisions and actions and change around that new awareness. So the client is responsible for defining what they're going to do with the awareness that's been raised.
Yeah, I remember studying at one point with our dear colleague Dorothy Siminovich, and she actually thought, instead of using the word coach, I think or that's not true. Instead of using the term change agent to talk about the work that we do, she used awareness agents. And I really like that centrality of awareness in coaching, of raising awareness. And we know from all of our work that it is awareness that is that first stepping stone on the road to change, right? if we agree on that, if we agree that awareness leads to change, then really our our first and foremost goal is awareness.
Yeah.
Expanding awareness.
Absolutely. Expanding awareness, and the very best awareness, the most light bulby awareness is the awareness that comes from within the client's frame of reference. And I think that's really significant, because so often in forms of team development, it's the intervener, the practitioner's role to bring content, to bring models, to bring frames, effectively to teach teams how to look at something, or how teaching individuals in teams how to make sense of their personality.
Yeah.
And in this instance, it's really clients' awareness that harnesses ownership and power.
And I forgot exactly when this took place, Georgina, but I remember you sharing an example with me once where I think you were giving a talk to a rather large group of coaches, and you asked them, how many of you do one-on-one coaching? And a lot of hands go up, right, in the room. And then you asked them, well, do you go into a one-on-one coaching session with an agenda, like at 9:00 we're going to do this, and at 10 minutes past 9 we'll be doing this or that? And they all look at you and they go, no, of course, we don't do that. So you can probably tell the story better than I do, but from what I remember is then asking the question of, well, in your team coaching, how many of you go in there with an agenda? And then people kind of look at themselves going, yeah, you know what, I tend to do that, but why do I do that?
That's a really powerful question. Why do I do that? And that question was really the catalyst for me to dive into and be curious about what is team coaching and what happens to us as coaches, that somehow we fundamentally give up that core practice of trusting in the client and in the client's wisdom.
Yeah.
And we do that from the moment we start bringing an overdose of content and being the clever person in the room and being the person with the agenda. Now, I'm not saying that there are not times throughout a team development process that those skills are incredibly helpful, but they're not coaching. They're not the coaching part of an intervention cycle.
I hear you. And they're not the real coaching part.
Yeah, they're not the real coaching part. Coaching with a capital C, as it were.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might be called part of team coaching. When we talk with clients about team coaching, we often give them a visual of a team coaching journey. And that visual illustrates that there's often different phases involved in an overall team development or team coaching program. And right at the start of the program, it's very likely that the coach is working in a facilitative style, and they're really trying to get a sense of what the development opportunities are, the learning opportunities are for the team. But once we've got that sense of what the learning goals are, that's when team coaching can start. And all great coaching sessions start with contracting around what you want to focus on today. And that may take some pre-work for a team to get to that place. So a team coaching session has a clear focus and has a learning agenda for the team, for the client.
Yeah. And so what's really becoming clear in my mind here is that when we're talking about real team coaching, we're talking about, just to summarize what we're saying is, so we're talking about coaching first and foremost. And why would we start to act differently when all of a sudden when we practice team coaching? And so these notions of partnership and of raising awareness and of co-creativity and of the client being, giving ownership to the team as the client, all that is still very valid. And yet I think this field of team coaching is at a point where, since there isn't a very clear understanding yet on behalf of the whole team coaching community at large of what team coaching is and what isn't, that there's a bit of that it tends to sometimes bleed over into some of these other valid but nevertheless different kind of interventions that are out there. And we spoke about it a little bit last time, but especially the line with facilitation, of course, is always a thin line.
Yes, that's right.
But I like what you said. Yeah, so we do team coaching sessions, right, with a clear focus and a learning agenda. But then I think we've also been in situations where we show up slightly differently, and I think we sometimes refer to that piece of work as live action coaching, where we may not go in with a specific learning agenda or a specific here's a topic for the day, but rather where we observe the team's processes from the sidelines almost, and intervene as much and as little and around specific topics as contracted with the team.
Yeah, and the prime difference is oftentimes when I'm working with a team, we'll have a development area that we're working on in live action coaching sessions. In team coaching sessions, the team I was working with last week, what emerged as a topic they wanted to work on was how they were going to make decisions together. So how leadership was going to work within this team. And so I coached the team around that, and they came to some agreements around how they were going to make decisions together in certain situations. Next time we get together, it'll be a live action coaching session. And this is, as you say, this is the team going about a normal business meeting. And my role there will be to observe the decision-making process in action. So this is where the power of coaching really comes in, because we're not just talking about what we're going to do outside the room, but the coach is really there to support the team in embedding what they've talked about in a coaching session, and embedding that into their practice in the here and now, in a real business context. And it's that I think makes such a difference, because we all know that the transfer of learning from training programs is quite low, because it's very difficult for us to transfer learning from a classroom environment to a real environment. So the coach really supports that. I'm sure there's many other ways that other coaches do coaching sessions, and it would be so interesting to hear from colleagues what they do. But they're really the two broad categories of coaching sessions that we do. Team coaching sessions around a clear focus and a learning agenda.
So when we're talking about team coaching and when we're talking about the way that we approach it, and we have shared at so many points in time, we've shared something that we've called the Team Coaching Competencies Wheel, right?
Yes.
That lists all the competencies and that not just the competencies, but also some of what we call the meta skills. And I do want to come back to the meta skills in just a second. But then when you really go to the center of that wheel, in other words, where we think real team coaching starts, so to speak, you come to this double notion of philosophy and stance, the coach's philosophy and the coach's stance. And maybe that is something that we can talk about for a few minutes, if that's okay with you.
Great idea. Absolutely. And we illustrate them like a yin-yang symbol, because they're inseparable, really. So when we talk about a philosophy, we're talking about our frame of reference, our worldview, around key aspects that are relevant to team coaching. So what are our beliefs, or what's our philosophy around leadership? What are our beliefs around teams and team effectiveness? What are our beliefs around coaching and the role of a coach? For example, do we see ourselves as an awareness agent, as a change agent, or as a thinking partner? All of those will manifest differently in terms of how we show up. And what's our philosophy around change? What's our methodology for change? Do we think that change happens by having a clear goal and then planning the steps towards that goal and overcoming obstacles? Or do we think change is much more a continual unfolding that emerges from the here and now? Very different and both very relevant philosophies that we see in action in different schools.
I love that last point. And do we think of change as requiring that we take the team somewhere else, or that we somehow change something in the team? Or do we think of change more along the lines of what was in Gestalt, help me out, but it was called the paradoxical theory of change.
That's right. Yeah.
Where which basically says, no, change happens when we become more of who we are, when we help the team become more of what it is. And that sounds paradoxical, but that, again, that goes back to the whole notion of expanding awareness. generating insights, and then change happening as a result of that,
Yes.
without us having to push the team in a certain way. And so this is key. This is central to the whole model and of thinking about real team coaching, because the way you think about all these things that you've just outlined about change and about people and about potential and about leadership, that's going to, right there, you're starting to shape how you're going to practice this and intervene. And that's different. That you will do that differently than I would or somebody else.
So it'll shape how you practice, how you intervene. You could say it underpins your approach. It's the ground that your approach rests on. And yet often when we're learning a new skill, I know for myself, when I've been learning about coaching, I kind of gather a huge amount of tools, exercises, assessments. I'm like a magpie gathering all this stuff because it fascinates me. But there's often no coherence between those different exercises and activities and tools. It's just because I like each tool. So the underpinning brings coherence to your methodology and approach.
And so, if that is what we mean by philosophy, what do we mean by the yin yang of philosophy that we've called stands? How do you look at stands? And maybe we can give a few examples of what our stances are.
Yes, absolutely. So to me, the stance is, how do we operationalize our philosophy? I like to think of a stance as a collection of mantras. Some might think of it as your manifesto. It's really, how are you going to behave or think in the moment, in the room with a team that supports you living up to your core beliefs? So some of the mantras within my own stance are things like trust the process. And many people may have that in their one-to-one coaching practice as a really powerful mantra for helping them stay on track. Or follow the client's agenda, follow the team's agenda. Let the client do the work. It's their work to do. And another one I love is it's all data. That mantra, it's all data, somehow enables me to stay present to whatever comes up in the room, even to intense conflict, and sort of sit in the fire or stay with the heat of it. I find that incredibly helpful. How about you? What are a few examples from your own stance?
So really this thinking of stance in terms of mantra is useful, because I often hear myself repeating mentally things like stay loose, stay loose, stay loose, because so that I don't get too fixed into a certain position or a certain line of thinking, and no, stay loose, because that allows me to stay with what's happening. And another one that often goes through my mind, as if I had a mala in my hand, right, counting these repetitions, and is wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, because you just know that something's about to happen, and you're inclined to jump in with another question or another observation or another remark or another smart experiment or something, and it's just no, wait for it, give it a bit more time. Yeah.
Great examples. And it sounds like both of those examples are something about being less attached in the moment, less sort of pulled in to something. Stay loose. I love stay loose.
Yeah. So you could bring in some, that reminds me that you could bring in something like, this is not about me. This is not about me. This is not about me. This is not about me.
That's really helpful one. It's not about me when attention's gone. The flow of attention's gone to myself because I'm concerned that I might not be performing, or I might not be adding enough value, something like that. It's not about me. It can just help regulate that moment.
Ooh, or how about it's all good? You mentioned it's all data.
All good, yeah.
It's all good. Yeah. Even when clearly things aren't going as planned. Yeah. And when people start to shout and a team member's not happy, and they look at you like, fix us, and you're the team coach and you should know how to do this. And rather than freaking out, maybe a mantra like, this is all good, it's all good, it's all good, is really helpful in moments like that.
It is what it is. It's not my job to change it. Good one. It's their work to change it. I like that.
It is what it is. Yeah. What a good one. That's a powerful one. It is what it is. So So that's the center of our approach to real team coaching. It's, be clear about what your philosophy is and what the mantras are that you can fall back on.
Yeah.
And that's a lot already, because if you meet a team with with clarity around your philosophy and a solid stance, then that is something that is always going to be with you. And you don't have to remember complicated models and frameworks and go, oh, what were those 4 quadrants and where does this team fit?
Yes, enables you to tune into the team, be really present in the moment.
I like that. It's present. Yeah, centered and present.
So you were talking about the TCS Team Coaching Wheel with the philosophy and stance right at the core, because it's an inside-out model. What's the next layer?
So the next layer is something that you're asking me like you don't know. You wrote the book.
I just like hearing you talk about it.
What? No, it's so now you're so old you don't remember what you wrote, right? It's like, what's the next layer you have called meta skills, and I love that because they're meta skills, and so they kind of come before we start to think about competencies per se. So they're like a slightly higher order of skills that influence at least the way we approach the work. And there's 3 meta skills, and again explained in depth in your book. So, but just to we can maybe go through them rather quickly. But the first one is about presence, right?
Yes.
And can I just read something real quick that I came about, and it's by, again, I think I mentioned her before, but our good friend Dorothy Siminovich, because there's not many people that talk as eloquently about presence and as she does. And I think she's thought about this topic so much. And so she says, for example, presence is a critical topic, yet one that's rather difficult to fully define and comprehend. Everyone has a presence that is unique to them, but coaches, consultants, and leaders, but coaches need to understand and be aware of their presence, what one's presence evokes in others. So what does our presence evoke in the team? And how can I strategically leverage my presence to provoke a change that is needed, wanted, or missing? You have your presence, and I have mine, and then all of our students and colleagues have a different presence. And that's where change starts, right?
Yeah.
The moment you walk in the room and the way you flex your presence, or the range in presence that you can muster, is going to have an impact, and that impact's going to be different than when I walk into that same room.
And in that beautiful quote that you've shared, that last sentence is really highlighting that presence, using our presence, is an intervention. So how do we use our presence to support or affect the change that's wanted or needed in the team?
Yeah.
And yet sometimes we think of content, you understanding a team effectiveness model or an exercise. Let's do a dead dogs exercise or something like that. Sharing personal shields exercise does the work. This puts the emphasis on the power of the presence of the coach. And we talk about 2 types of presence. I mean, we talk about many types of presence in our training, but we often look to observe 2 significant types of presence. And one is an evocative presence, where you can open up the space, create trust, create connection with clients, draw out awareness through creating this safe space, meeting clients where they're at, and then shifting when the time's right towards a provocative presence. Just as much provocation as is needed to provoke change. And some coaches we observe are very good at the evocative presence and have something to learn, especially with teams, about an evocative presence. And that may just come through expanding your body and body language, of raising your voice, coming forward, standing in, being more animated. There's various ways we embody a more provocative presence in order to grab attention and hold attention on a particular theme.
And then, okay, so we said there were 3 meta skills, and so
Yeah.
from awareness, we kind of slide then into use of self, which starts with how do you apply your presence, right? How do you make use of who you are? How do you use yourself as a tool to intervene?
Yeah, so whereas presence is around our identity and our particular distinctive way of being, use of self is about using that awareness, using that in an intervention way to influence an outcome.
Yeah. And so we sometimes talk about use of self as noticing what's being said, noticing what's not being said, noticing behaviors in the team, and then sharing those observations. But it's also, I think, there's also more of a somatic kind of use of self. So how what do you feel, and where do you feel that in your body, and what might that possibly mean in terms of, but maybe also sharing some of the thoughts and things that come up for you, and so really you make full use of yourself as an instrument of intervention.
Yes. Yeah, the team I was with last week, at one point during the day, they were working together on what's the added value of being a team, what's the work of this team. And at one point in time, I was quietly observing. I wasn't leading the process in any way. They were working around a table. I was off to one side. I could feel a drop in the energy. I noticed a little agitation, a bit sort of someone standing up to the side. Someone went off and picked up their phone, a little bit of distraction. I have a choice at that point, not because I think that they need to change the energy. That would be maybe a facilitator's job. It's their job to change their energy. I wanted to heighten their awareness of it and say, well, I'm curious, what's happening right now? I sense it's gone a bit flat. What's happening? And then someone in the team was able to name it and say, I think we've lost what we were trying to do here. And I don't quite know what we were trying to achieve and what's the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And then I could open it back up to the team and say, well, what were you trying to achieve? Let's have a conversation about that and see if you can get yourselves back on track.
Yeah.
So it's quite a simple intervention, oftentimes, but it's often about naming what cannot be named or what's out of awareness, what there's no words for, because it's easier to do from the position of coach often than it is as a team member. And then the last meta skill is active experiments. So share a little bit about active experiments.
So I always think of active experiments as not as pre-planned kind of exercises or activities that we bring to a session with the intent of using them then and there, but really helping the team apply their newfound awareness in the here and now. Yeah. So if all of a sudden there's an awareness around, like, wow, we really have a tendency to go around in circles in this team, or we really have a tendency to interrupt each other, and we're really becoming aware of that, then an active experiment might be something that the coach suggests or that the team suggests. We go from it being to doing, so something that we do here and now. So the active experiment there might be, well, how about, what would it be like if for 10 minutes we very consciously do not interrupt each other? Let's experiment with that and see what happens. And so it's a further continuation of that, of, it starts with my presence and then goes into use of self, and then presence kind of closes that loop of this mini technology for change.
I like that, mini technology for change, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, meta skills and methodology.
I don't mean to diminish it, because it's actually really maxi.
Yeah.
Because, so if we go back, so we've got philosophy, and then we've got stance, and then we've got our own presence that we are, and it's how we do we, and what other ways we can do we. And then making use of ourselves to intervene, and then just co-creating experiments with teams in the here and now, then that is real team coaching. Then you don't need all those complicated models and frameworks and the 7-step approaches that will work in some cases, but that will not work in others. And then if you've, like, what have you got to fall back on when all of a sudden your beautiful 7-step model doesn't work? Well, you can fall back on real team coaching.
Yeah, using awareness in the moment and inviting the team to take responsibility for what's occurring and to create new ways of being together. And that way they're learning and embedding capability in the here and now, as you said. And I'm conscious what we haven't talked about is the next layer of the wheel, which is a collection of 12 competencies distributed across 5 clusters, many of which will be familiar to team coaches, like active listening and powerful questioning. But some of the competencies in our wheel are really much more applicable to working with teams, like working with power and authority, and focus on relationships in the system. I'm sure we'll come back to those in a future episode.
I'm thinking we should do a whole session on those competencies maybe next time.
Good idea. Let's dive deep into the competencies. But hopefully for now, we've generated some food for thought. And for anyone listening to this, perhaps you could really think about what's your philosophy and how might that translate into a stance for team coaching.
And what are the mantras that allow you to bounce back like one of those old roly-poly toys, that when the team kind of knocks you over, what gets you back on your feet? That's
right. And if you want to dive more into the meta skills that we've talked about today, they're described in more depth in my book. But there's also some lovely reflective practice questions at the end of each chapter provided by Dr. Declan Woods, who can really support you in clarifying your philosophy and stance and your understanding of meta skills.
So, George, what I feel like saying right now, like last time we spoke a little bit about, and it's the title of this series, right? That the future of coaching is team coaching.
That's right.
But I want to go back and maybe say that the future of coaching is real team coaching.
I like that. Let's dial up the provocation and really encourage coaches to explore real team coaching. And in its simplest form, one way you can do that is to think about what you do in one-to-one coaching and think what elements of that you could apply in your team coaching and see how that goes.
All right. So thanks for spending this half hour with us, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again soon and to continue this conversation about the future of coaching being real team coaching and the different facets and elements of that. It's been a pleasure. George, how do you feel?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and as always, it's got me really fired up again with passion and enthusiasm for team coaching, and I can't wait to get into the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I'm Georgina Woudstra.
And I am Allard de Jong. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society at large.
To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationofcoaching.com. There you can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insight from the Coaching Perspectives magazine.